It was May 1990. I remember the date specifically because I was alone in my apartment, and I had just finished watching the final episode of Season 2 of the TV show, Quantum Leap. This was a sci-fi show where the main character, Sam, goes back in time and has to set something right. He was helped by his sidekick, Al, played by Dean Stockwell. In the final scene of this episode, Al, who was separated from his wife Beth by time and space, has traveled back in time to see her. He finds her crying in the living room, missing him. The episode name is MIA, and that's what he is. For a moment, you think that she's moving towards him, but instead she's moving towards the record player, and she puts on a really sad song, Georgia. She dances alone, and Al joins her. She doesn't see him, and he's unable to touch her. He's full of tears, and he begs her to wait for him. And he tells her he loves her. That's the end of the episode. The show scene was so sad. I shut the television, didn't put on the light, and walked over to the record player of my own and played a song that was in the episode, and I owned it, Unchained Melody. I didn't put on the lights after that either, but instead grabbed a pillow from the couch. I was alone, and I swayed with the music, just as Beth did in the show. And I listened, and I hummed, and I swayed, getting lost in the song. I was swaying, and then out of nowhere, I felt a quick puff of cold air on the right side of my face, coming from behind my ear and onto my cheek. It came quick, out of nowhere, and it was strong, and it was cold, and I could hear it in my ear. Let me be clear, it was not subtle. It was real, so real that I remember every detail of that night, of that moment. After it happened, I walked over to the record player, shut off the song, and clicked on the living room light. And the television, it went right back on. I don't dance in the dark any longer. One afternoon, I was doing dishes. You're by the sink, looking out the window, and I feel this coldness on my hip. A coldness that you can't even describe, like ice cold, go right through my hip. And I thought about it, and I said to myself, what is that? And it felt like a hand, like a little bit of a pressure. And after a while, it just went away. When you see a ghost, it's not subtle. When you hear a ghost, it's not faint. So I lived in a 3-story house, the lower story being the basement. It was about 800 square feet, and it was unfinished, and I would work down there because I could leave my papers around, and I could draw, and I could read, and I could leave my stuff undisturbed, books everywhere, and there wasn't a lot of light. I had a light bulb that used to hang from the ceiling, which was fine where I was, but outside like 5 feet, it was complete darkness. And one night I was down there reading or writing on my chalkboard, and my brother ran down the stairs. It was a boy, blonde hair, who I thought was my brother. He looked at me, I looked at him, and he ran up those stairs so frightened. And I was like, what was that about? And I yelled out, Ricky, what do you want? Ricky was my older brother, but the one closest in age to me. So he was probably at the time 15 and I was about 11. So he didn't respond. He ran up the stairs, didn't say anything. So pretty soon I had to wrap up my stuff, go up the stairs, shut the light, and my mother and father in the living room. So they must have saw Ricky. So I said, what was that about? What did Ricky want? And she's saying, what are you talking about? And I said, he ran down the stairs, scared me to death, and he didn't even say anything. He just ran back up the stairs. She said, Ricky's working tonight. My mother-in-law, Ginny, would often joke that if she ever won the lottery, she'd buy a great big house and a brand new car. We'd laugh when she went on this way because we knew how badly she drove, and she never played the lottery. But she didn't enjoy gambling, and she didn't have Sunday drives for that matter, but she did enjoy her grandchild, Rachel. When Rachel was a baby, she'd visit her grandma and zip around her house in a walker, and she caused all kinds of havoc. She'd make the dog go scurrying away, and she'd make figurines fall off shelves. She was a one-baby wrecking crew on wheels. Sadly, Ginny died before Rachel was finally talking and walking. At family dinners, my sister-in-laws would remember her and how sad they were that they couldn't spend time with her anymore. At one family dinner, Rachel heard her aunties talk this way about her grandma and told them not to be sad. She explained that Grandma was very happy. She said, Grandma's happy now because she has a great big house and a brand new car. The aunts were surprised and a little afraid. How do you know that? Said Auntie Debbie. Grandma told me last night, she told her aunt. She then went on to explain that Grandma would sit with her on her bed every night and visit. She explained, without a second thought, Grandma told me she has a car, so she can go wherever she wants and whenever she wants. And a great big house with lots and lots of room. Sometimes ghosts insist on making the truth come to light. My oldest could talk before she could walk. She loved to chat it up with anyone who came to visit. So as a toddler, she would get especially excited when we invited people over for a party. One particular July 4th barbecue by the backyard pool, her uncle and godfather made his usual appearance. She was so happy to see him that she ran to him yelling and squealing, Uncle Tony, Uncle Tony. Her loud screeches of delight caught my attention, so I looked over to see what she was so excited about. I saw my brother-in-law scoop her up in his arms. I saw the whole exchange. But I also heard what Rachel was saying clearly. I wondered, who was Uncle Tony? I went over to my husband, caught his attention, and asked, who's Uncle Tony? He answered quickly, without hesitation, Chucky. I must have had a confused look on my face because he quickly explained that his brother, who was also called Chucky, Rachel's uncle and godfather, who's holding her now, had a real name that no one in the family ever used. His real name is Anthony, my husband said. He then explained that my brother-in-law was named after their father, Anthony. He further explained, my father wanted his first son to be named after him. My mom hated the name Anthony and told him if he insisted on naming the baby Anthony, she would never call him that. She would never use that name. She would instead call him, from that day on, Chucky. My husband ended the explanation with, despite what my mom wanted, my dad ended up calling him Anthony, and there you go. Now, at that point, I had known my brother-in-law for at least 10 years. I even worked with him in an office for a couple of years, and I never once heard anyone call him anything but Chucky. Not Anthony, not Tony, just Chucky. So I walked over to him. I asked, I noticed that Rachel called you Uncle Tony. When did you ever tell her your real name? He quickly told me that he never did. And he said, why would I? To this day, my daughter still calls Chucky Uncle Tony. She's the only one in the family that does. When she finally explained to us where she came up with the name, she told us that her grandfather told her during his last visit with her. He told her to call her uncle Uncle Tony. It seems Chucky's dad told our daughter, the first granddaughter of the family, this very well-kept, nearly forgotten family secret. Easy explanation, right? After all, he loved the name Anthony and felt strongly that his first son have his name. He always wanted everyone in the city to call his son what people called him, Tony. But there's one problem with this explanation. At that time, Rachel's grandfather had been dead for over 40 years. The day started in the usual way. My husband went to work, I took the kids to school, and then I returned home alone to clean up the kitchen before I spent the day in my home office with my eyes glued to my 2 computer screens. Being from New England, we have 2 kitchen back doors, a heavy wooden inner door and an outside aluminum storm door. When the weather is nice, we often have the inner door open so the light comes in. The storm door, however, is closed and often hook-locked. Then and now, when I'm alone, I lock the storm door with a hook at the very top of the door. We installed it that way because we have a pool and he didn't want the kids to just wander off unsupervised into the backyard. At the time of this story, the hook was new and very tight. I often needed to pry it loose to open the door. This morning, like most, before my day job took over all my attention until lunch, I headed out the back door to spend some time with my 2 dogs. We all looked forward to this 10 minutes of fun as both dogs ran through the door and I ran after them. We left the inner door wide open. I remember hearing the storm door bang shut behind me as I walked across the porch and down towards the pool in the fenced-in yard. I threw the ball a bit on our grassy section and played tag with the 2 dogs. And then we were heading back towards the back porch. Our morning ritual was done. We had a lot of fun running around. We were laughing, barking, and playing. But it was time to go in. But when I got to the back door, the storm door wouldn't open. I could see into the sunny, quiet, empty kitchen. The latch on the handle clicked, but the door wouldn't open. It even bent a bit, the door, but it still was stuck at the very top where that hook lock was located. That was odd. The dogs, expecting they were going in, were barking, their heads pressed up against the door as they anticipated it opening so that they can grab a drink of water. But I couldn't do it. I tried pushing on the door and retried the handle. I even hit it a little on the outside where the lock was located, at the top, but no luck. I finally gave up trying to pry the door open. I left the dogs in the backyard, grabbed the hidden spare key, and opened the cellar door. I then climbed the rickety wooden stairs, and thank God the cellar door leading to the kitchen was shut, but not locked. I then walked into the kitchen. The inner door was how I left it, wide open, the sun streaming in. I was really expecting to see the hook jabbed in between the door and the door jamb. No, the hook was hooked in the eye. By the time this happened, the dogs were really making a ruckus. They wanted me to open the door. They could see me from the porch, so I reached up to unlock the door. The hook was not slightly in the hole. It wasn't a little bit off. It was solidly locked tight, and I needed to pry it open with some effort. So I opened the door and let the dogs in, and I called for my husband. He must have returned home for some reason and locked me out of the house. I didn't think it was very funny, but there was nothing. So I went to see if his car was in the driveway. Not there. The two dogs and I were alone. How do you think the door happened to get locked and keep me out of the house? What do you think happened? Could it be that my resident ghost was not fond of me playing with my dogs and having a great time? Could he have been jealous of the cries of laughter coming from the backyard? Let me know what you think. Pregnant, exhausted, and alone in my house, I laid down for a quick nap in a back bedroom one late, dark afternoon. With my back towards the closed door, I slept, only to be awakened moments later when the bedroom door swung open, suddenly. I turned in time to see the door close and hear what I thought was my young daughter run up the hallway into my bedroom. I caught the sound of what I imagined was her tiny feet on the rugged wooden floor and her little left hand hitting each of the hollow wooden banisters that ran along the dark hallway. I called out as I followed her out of the room, but there was no one in the hall. She wasn't in the back bedroom either. There was no one in the house at all. Before I could even think about what just happened, my husband and daughter returned home through the front door. As they stood in the front foyer banging their booted feet on the rug to break off the snow, I realized that I had been completely alone in the house. But who had I startled by laying in the back bedroom? Who came upon a sleeping woman in a silent house and run off, afraid? It could all be a coincidence, but Jill and I share a lot. We were born at the same month, the same year. When we first met, we were both divorced. But the strangest twist, well, maybe not the strangest, is that we eventually married two men who are brothers. Jill married the oldest brother of the family. I married the youngest. At the time when I had my vision, I was a busy working mom of a beautiful 3-year-old. My day-to-day was hectic. I was just beginning a new business, and although life was full, my husband and I were open to adding a second child to our small young family. It was amid this mild chaos that I experienced what you could not call a dream. I was very awake. I saw a scene unfold before me, kind of like watching a movie. The picture of what I saw wasn't crystal clear. It was, in fact, a bit blurry. You could even say choppy. The mental picture was fuzzy, partially because of the sun. The sun was blinding and bright. It hit me right in the face. But through the strong light, I saw two toddlers. They were just beginning to walk, not sure-footed, but moving forward under their own energy. It was a happy scene. The children were the same height, and on their heads grew short, straight, blonde hair that was closely cropped and nowhere near their shoulders. Neither wore shoes, and their bare feet left small marks in the soft sand that they were walking on. The sun was warm, I could tell, because both children wore bright cotton shorts. In the vision, the children held hands and walked ahead and away from me along a wide open beach. They never once turned back, much to my disappointment. The scene only lasted a few seconds, but I instantly knew that they were related to each other somehow. Brothers, maybe cousins. I was immediately convinced that at least one of them was mine. After the experience, I told my husband that I knew in my heart that I had seen the future. It wasn't long after that Jill called. She had big news. She couldn't wait to share. She was pregnant. She was excited. And we were very happy for her. After all, this was her first child. But when I hung up the phone, I turned to my husband, and as I spoke, the message of the vision I had experienced earlier was suddenly very clear. She can't be pregnant, I said, because I'm not pregnant. In that moment, and not a moment before, I knew I had seen our children, Jill's and mine. Sadly, though, the moment wasn't right. Jill called a few days later to tell us she had in fact lost the baby. Time passed, and in a few months, Jill was once again on the phone. She had news. She was pregnant again. It was during this phone call, the second call, that I told her about my vision. The sun, the happy feeling, the tiny footprints in the sand, the boys in cotton shorts. To my amazement, she did not question my state of mind, but she did ask a simple question. Are you pregnant? I told her I did not think so. My husband and I weren't really trying to have a baby, although I told her we would be happy to welcome a second child to the family if such a thing were to happen. Days slipped by, and Jill called again with sad news. She had a second miscarriage. I brought up my vision, and that there was a baby in her future. I was sure of it. Just not now, but soon. And she shouldn't give up hope. It was an unhappy time, but life again moved on. Finally, some weeks later, Jill called us the third time. She was again happy, but this time apprehensive. Remembering the vision, she was more than a little cautious. She said quickly on the phone, getting right to the point, I'm pregnant. She then quickly followed that joyful news with a very nervous question. Is there any way that you're pregnant too? I looked at my husband, back at the phone. You know, I could be, I said. I had no reason to think I wasn't. It was a possible situation. We lived less than a mile from the pharmacy, so my husband volunteered to run out and pick up a pregnancy test. I hung up the phone, waited for him to return, and took the test as soon as I could. This time I was, in fact, pregnant. The first thing we did was dial Jill's number to tell her the good news. We figured out the timing. We were both expecting summer babies. Our news was soon confirmed, and we found we had nearly the same due date. We even ended up with the same doctor, and we planned on having the babies at the same hospital. Less than 9 months later, Jill and I welcomed beautiful baby girls into this world. I was wrong, of course. I thought we were going to have boys. But these cousins did, in fact, have blonde hair and were born only 4 days apart. Jill's daughter was born first, and then my precious Jules. Thanks for listening. One morning I was making breakfast for Rachel. She was at the age where she was out of a high chair but using a booster seat. I was in the kitchen, and I got out that bright blue plastic booster and put it at the end of the kitchen's L-shaped bench. Then I called Rachel to come and eat. She ran in as toddlers do. She climbed onto the bench, picked up the booster, and moved it from the end, nearest me, to the middle of the long bench. I didn't really mind, but now I have to reach across the table to give her breakfast. So I asked her, Baby, why'd you have to move the chair from the end to the middle? Mummy's going to have to reach across the table to give you breakfast. She said, Sorry, Mama, but there's a man sitting there. And she pointed to the end of the bench. I was used to Rachel's ghostly proclamations at this point. She had talked to my husband's dead father, after all. Got visits from her deceased grandmother, and once asked my husband to move the cows in the living room because they were blocking her view of the television. So I just let it go and went on with putting the finishing touches on her breakfast. But when I turned around to hand her the bowl of oatmeal, I noticed her legs were crossed, causing her to lean forward on the booster. Worried that she would fall forward, I asked her to straighten out her legs. She said she couldn't. Why, baby? I asked. Because the man is tickling my feet, she said. Impossibly, I understood what was going on. No, I didn't see the man. No, I didn't see hands reach out and tickling her feet. But I did remember that when my grandfather, Rachel's great-grandfather, would visit me after church, he would sit with his top coat on, hat on the bench next to him, and a cup of coffee on the table, in the exact spot that Rachel was telling me a man now sat. And I also knew it was my grandfather for another reason. Because when I sat with Papa when I was a toddler, and he sat next to me at the end of the bench by the back door in the exact kitchen, he would reach out under the table and tickle my feet. Can you change your future? If you see what's coming, can you do anything to avoid what is coming your way? Here is a story of precognition, premonition, and unfortunately, the inevitable. I always wear a seatbelt. I had a vision in the summer. I was driving in the snow, hate the snow. I live in New England. And I'm driving, and I notice I don't have my seatbelt on. And I get into a terrible accident, and I even know where it happens. It's a place called Linshore Drive, and it's snowing. And this street is icy, and the water is right there. It's salt water. The ocean's right there. Anyway, I fishtail, and I turn around. I made a 360, and I slide sideways. But I notice I don't have on my seatbelt. So I decide to be very, very cautious from now on and wear that seatbelt. So I start a new job, and believe it or not, I have to drive Linshore Drive to get there. So one day I look out the window, it is snowing. But it's a new job. I have to get there. So I said, I'm just going to be, take it easy, put on my seatbelt, and I'll get there and I'll be fine. Then I remember that I'm a reporter. I have some running to do, so I have to stop and get a newspaper. So I say, well, I'll just drive in here, pick up the newspapers that I need, and I'll be fine. So I get in the car, put on my seatbelt, click, feeling good, drive down the street, and I come up to the place where I could pick up the newspaper. So run out of the car, pick up the papers that I need, get back in the car, throw off my hat, throw off my gloves. I'm going to be comfortable. The car's nice and warm at this point. And guess what? I pull out of that driveway without putting on my seatbelt. So I'm going along, and we have something called 107, which crosses a marsh. And I'm driving, and I notice that there's a light up ahead. I'll put my seatbelt on at the light. But in front of me is a snowplow, and it's throwing off rock salt. And the rock salt's hitting the windshield, and it's very uncomfortable. I can't see. It's really snowing at this point. And I don't have on my seatbelt. So I decide that I'm going to go around the snowplow. And this isn't even the street it's supposed to happen on, right? It's Linshore Drive that I'm worried about. So, and there's the light right ahead, so I'll put that seatbelt on. Because I know if I have that seatbelt on, the thing isn't going to happen, because that's not how it goes. That's not what I saw. So I decide to go around this snowplow. And I didn't realize that the ridge that the plow had left in the road was pretty high. And so I had to go over the ridge. And the car kicks out. It fishtails. I'm turning around. I'm looking. the snowplow is now, it's past the light, it's gone. And I look in my rear view and my side view mirrors, and everybody stops. And they let me turn, and I hit the guardrail. I go across 2 lanes. I hit the curb. I say, oh, good, it's done. I look down. I don't have on my seatbelt, and I careen across 2 lanes again. Well, I did, in fact, total the car. And I did, in fact, not have on that seatbelt. And I was so diligent about wearing it. And I was so careful. And I was wrong. It was not the right street. It was a highway, a little highway called 107 crossing a marsh, as I said. And it wasn't Linshore Drive, which is right on the ocean. And so I was right again and a little bit wrong. So do you think that if you saw the future, you could change it? I thought I could. I could keep on wearing that seatbelt and I would change things. But it turned out that I really couldn't change what was coming my way. And I do have a couple more things that I've seen, and I hope to God that I can change it, because I don't want it coming my way. Thank you for listening to Sharp Edges, Inexplicable But True. If you like listening to true stories that make you question what you see and call reality, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and please leave a comment. And finally, if you have a true story that you would like to share, be sure to send it to sharpedges2021@gmail.com. Until next time, look out for those sharp edges.